The workplace was silent after hours, but their presence turned every shadow into a secret I couldn't ignore. I'm Emily Johnson, and I never thought my 9-to-5 grind would unravel into something so dangerously intoxicating. Yet here, I am, spilling it all out. Every forbidden glance, every whispered moment, because keeping it inside is no longer an option. It started on a Tuesday night, when I stayed late at the office to finish a project that could make or break my next promotion. The corporate floor was a ghost town, just me and the hum of my laptop. Or so I thought. As my fingers raced across the keyboard, a prickling sensation crawled up my neck, like someone was watching me. I spun around, heart thudding, but the cubicle stretched out empty under the dim fluorescent lights. Shaking it off, I told myself it was nothing. Just the late hour playing tricks, but the feeling wouldn't leave. It lingered, heavy and electric, wrapping around me like a secret waiting to be uncovered. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from something else. Something I shouldn't feel here of all places. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps echoing down the hall. I looked up, and there he was. Michael Thompson, my boss, leaning against the edge of my cubicle. Tall, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that could cut through you, he carried that effortless charm everyone admired. "Emily, burning the midnight oil again?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost too low for the empty office. "Just wrapping up the quarterly report, Mr. Thompson," I replied, forcing a steady tone even as my skin prickled under his gaze. There was something in the way he looked at me, steady, searching, that made the air feel too thick. "You work too hard," he said, stepping closer, close enough that I caught the faint scent of his cologne. "You should take a break sometime." His words were casual, but his tone wasn't. It was a thread of something unspoken, tugging at boundaries I'd sworn to keep intact. Across the room, I saw Sarah Miller, my coworker, my confidant, packing up her bag. Her blonde ponytail swung as she moved, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing at my desk. Sarah was the kind of person who knew everyone's business but kept her own locked tight. I wondered if she sensed it too, the shift in the air, or if she was just too good at pretending. Then there was Jessica Lee, my rival, the office's golden girl with a smile that could charm clients and a ruthlessness that could bury you. She'd left hours ago, or so I'd thought. But with her, you never knew. She had a way of lurking, waiting for any slip-up to turn into her next victory. I could almost picture her now, spying from some shadowed corner, ready to twist this moment into ammunition. Michael leaned over my desk, his hand brushing the edge of my papers. "Emily, there's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. My breath hitched. What was he about to say? Something professional? Personal? Something I'd regret hearing? The tension coiled. Tighter, and just as I braced myself for his next words, the lights overhead flickered, then plunged us into darkness. Subscribe for more confessions. The darkness swallowed everything, leaving me suspended in a void where only the sound of my own breath and the faint rustle of Michael's clothes existed. My heart slammed against my ribs, not from the blackout, but from the way his presence filled the space between us, thick and undeniable. I could feel him standing just inches away, though I couldn't see him. The air hummed with something unspoken, something dangerous. "Emily?" His voice was closer than I expected, low and steady, like a tether pulling me back from the edge of panic. "You okay?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "Yeah, just startled, I guess." My voice came out shakier than I wanted, betraying the storm inside me. I wasn't scared of the dark. I was scared of what it was doing to me, how it blurred the lines I'd drawn so carefully. "We should find a flashlight or check the breaker," he said, his tone casual, But there was an undercurrent to it, something that made my skin prickle, unless you'd rather stay here in the dark. Was that a challenge? A tease? I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty only heightened the tension coiling in my chest. "I'll help," I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. "But I don't know where the breaker is." "I do." His hand brushed my arm as he moved past me, the contact brief but electric. "Follow me." I trailed behind him, my steps tentative in the pitch-black office. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the floor, the soft scrape of his shoes, the rustle of papers as we passed desks. My senses were on high alert, attuned to every shift in the air, every subtle movement he made. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't entirely alone, that someone else was watching from the shadows. As we reached the hallway, a faint glow appeared at the far end. Someone's phone light, bobbing like a distant star. "Hello?" a voice called out. It was Sarah, her blonde ponytail barely visible in the dim light. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a new kind of tension. Sarah was perceptive, and if she sensed something between Michael and me, it wouldn't stay a secret for long. "Sarah, it's us," Michael called back. "Power's out. We're heading to the breaker." She hurried toward us, her phone casting eerie shadows on the walls. Thank God. I thought I was the only one left. Her eyes flicked between us, and I wondered if she could feel the charge in the air. "Need an extra hand?" "Sure," Michael said, his tone neutral. But I caught the brief glance he shot my way. Was he disappointed that we weren't alone anymore? Or relieved? We moved as a trio down the hall, Sarah's light guiding the way. The silence between us felt heavy, laden with things unsaid. I tried to focus on the task, but my mind kept drifting back to Michael. His proximity, the way his voice had softened when he spoke to me in the dark. As we reached the utility room, Michael fumbled with the door. "It's locked," he muttered. "Of course." "Great," Sarah sighed. "Now what?" I leaned against the wall, frustration bubbling up. But then, a soft click echoed from the other end of the hall. We all turned, and there, emerging from the shadows, was Jessica Lee. Her silhouette was unmistakable, sharp, poised, like a predator stalking its prey. She held a key ring in one hand, dangling it with a sly smile. "Looking for these?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock innocence. I figured someone might need them. My stomach twisted. Jessica was the last person I wanted here, witnessing this, whatever this was. She thrived on leverage, and if she suspected anything, between Michael and me, she'd use it without hesitation. Michael stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Thanks, Jessica. We were just about to head back." She handed him the keys, her eyes lingering on me a second too long. "Always happy to help," she said, her smile sharp as a blade. "Especially when things get interesting." The utility room felt smaller than ever as Michael and I stood side by side, our breaths shallow in the dim glow of Sarah's phone light. Jessica's heels clicked away down the hall, her parting words. "Especially when things get interesting," hanging in the air like a warning. I swallowed hard, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine, but it was impossible with Michael so close, his arm brushing mine as he reached for the breaker panel. "All right, let's see what's going on here," he murmured, his voice low and steady. But I could hear the edge beneath it. His fingers worked the switches, and every time his hand grazed mine, a jolt shot through me, sharp, undeniable. I tried to focus on the task, but my mind kept drifting to the way his jaw clenched in concentration, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the stale air. Sarah hovered nearby, her light casting long shadows on the walls. Do you think it's just a blown fuse? She asked, her voice a little too bright, as if she was trying to cut through the tension. Probably, Michael replied, but his eyes flicked to me, lingering a second too long. Emily, can you hold this switch down while I check the main? I nodded, stepping closer. Our fingers touched as I took over, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that single point of contact. His skin was warm, rougher than I'd imagined, and I had to fight the urge to let my hand linger. Instead, I focused on the panel, willing the lights to come back on so I could escape this suffocating closeness. With a soft click, the breakers reset, and the room flooded with harsh fluorescent light. I blinked, disoriented, as the spell shattered. Michael stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, that was eventful. I forced a laugh, but it came out breathless. Yeah, not exactly how I planned to spend my night. Our eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything else faded. The utility room, Sarah's watchful gaze, Jessica's lurking threat. There was only him and me, suspended in a moment that felt too fragile to hold. I could see it in his eyes. The same pull, the same question. What if? But before I could find out, the door swung open, and Sarah burst in, her face pale. Guys, we have a problem. Jessica just told me there's been a break-in in the parking lot. Her car's been vandalized. My stomach dropped. What? Michael's expression hardened, his protective instincts kicking in. Let's go check it out. Emily, stay close. We hurried down the hall, the office now buzzing with a different kind of energy. The break-in was a jolt of reality, a reminder that the world outside our little bubble still existed. But even as we moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, something irreversible. In the parking lot, Jessica stood by her car, arms crossed, her usual composure fraying at the edges. The driver's side window was shattered, glass glittering on the asphalt like fallen stars. A security guard was already there, scribbling notes, but Jessica's eyes were on us, sharp, calculating. About time, she snapped, her gaze flicking between Michael and me. I've been waiting for someone to do something. Michael stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. The police are on their way. We'll figure this out. Jessica's lips curled into a tight smile. Oh, I'm sure you will. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. Emily, can I have a word? My pulse quickened. I glanced at Michael, who gave a subtle nod, though his jaw tightened. Sure, I said, following her a few steps away. As soon as we were out of earshot, Jessica's demeanor changed. Her voice dropped to a hiss. I know what's going on between you and Michael. Don't think I haven't noticed. My heart slammed against my ribs. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, she spat. The late nights, the excuses to be alone, and now this, cozying up in the dark while the rest of us deal with real problems. She gestured to her car, but her eyes never left mine. If you don't back off, I'll make sure everyone knows. Fear coiled in my stomach, but I forced myself to stay calm. Jessica, there's nothing going on. We were just fixing the breaker. She laughed, a bitter sound. Save it. I've seen the way he looks at you. And you... She stepped closer, her voice a venomous whisper. You're not as innocent as you pretend to be. Before I could respond, Michael's voice cut through the tension. Police are here. They need statements from everyone. Jessica shot me one last glare before turning on her heel. This isn't over, she muttered, as the officers began their questioning. I stood frozen, Jessica's words echoing in my mind. She knew, or at least she suspected, and if she was willing to use this break-in as leverage, what else would she do? But there was something else, something about the timing, the way she'd been waiting with the keys, her car targeted, It didn't add up. Was this really just a random act? Or was there more to it? Little did I know, the break-in was only the beginning, and the secrets we were hiding were about to unravel in ways I never imagined. The parking lot was a blur of flashing lights and muffled voices. But all I could focus on was the way Michael's hand brushed mine as we stood side by side, watching the police tape off Jessica's car. It was a fleeting touch. Accidental, but it sent a jolt through me. Sharp, undeniable. I glanced at him, and for a brief second, our eyes locked. There was something raw in his gaze, something that mirrored the chaos inside me. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but Jessica's threat echoed in my mind, holding me back. "Emily," Michael said softly, his voice almost lost in the hum of the crowd. "We need to talk. Later." My heart skipped a beat. "About what?" He didn't answer, just gave me a look that said everything and nothing at the same time. Before I could press him, an officer approached, notepad in hand. "Ms. Johnson, we need your statement." I nodded, forcing myself to focus. As I recounted the events, staying late, the blackout, fixing the breaker, I could feel Jessica's eyes boring into me from across the lot. She was speaking to another officer, her gestures sharp, her expression unreadable. My stomach churned. What was she saying? Was she spinning her web, ready to trap me? When the police finally released us, the office was eerily quiet. Most people had left, but Michael lingered by my desk, his presence like a magnet I couldn't resist. "Let's go to my office," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I followed him, my pulse racing. The door clicked shut behind us, and suddenly, the space felt too small, too charged. He turned to face me, his eyes dark, intense. "Emily, I can't pretend anymore." My breath caught. "Pretend what?" "That there's nothing between us." He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. "Every time I see you, it's like, I don't know how to stop this. I should have stepped back. I should have reminded him, and myself, of the rules, the risks. But instead I whispered, 'Then don't.'" His hand cupped my face, his thumb tracing my jaw, and for a moment, the world stopped. Then his lips were on mine, urgent, desperate, like he'd been holding back for too long. I melted into him, my fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him closer. It was everything I'd imagined and more, electric, overwhelming. But as quickly as it began, reality crashed in. The door slammed open, and there stood Jessica, her face a mask of triumph. "Well, well," she sneered. "I knew it, Michael." Pulled away, his expression hardening. "Jessica, it's not what it looks like." "Oh, isn't it?" She held up her phone, the screen glowing with a photo. Michael and me, caught in the act. I think this speaks for itself. My blood ran cold. "Jessica, please, save it," she snapped. "You thought you could play me, but I've been one step ahead this whole time." She turned to Michael, her voice dripping with venom. "And you, did you really think you could keep this a secret? The board will love hearing about your little indiscretion." Michael's jaw clenched. "What do you want, Jessica?" She smiled, cold and calculating. "Your resignation and Emily's termination, or this photo goes public." The ground tilted beneath me. I gripped the edge of the desk, my knees weak. This was it, the moment everything fell apart. I'd crossed the line, and now I was paying the price. But then, something shifted in Michael's eyes. He straightened, his voice steady. "No." Jessica blinked, caught off guard. "What?" I'm not resigning. And Emily stays. He stepped forward, his presence commanding. You think you can blackmail me? Go ahead, release the photo. But know this, I have dirt on you too. The break-in? It wasn't random. Was it? You staged it to frame Emily, to make her look guilty. My head snapped up. What? Jessica's face paled. That's ridiculous. Is it? Michael pulled out his phone, showing a series of messages. I had security check the footage. You were the last person near your car before the break-in. And those keys you so conveniently had? You took them from the janitor's closet. The pieces clicked into place. Jessica had orchestrated everything, using the chaos to catch us, to wield her power. But she hadn't counted on Michael fighting back. You have no proof, she spat, but her voice wavered. Try me, Michael said, his tone icy. Walk away now, and we'll forget this ever happened. Or push me, and I'll make sure you're the one who loses everything. For a long moment, they stared each other down. Then, with a furious huff, Jessica spun on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I exhaled, shaky, relief flooding through me, but it was short-lived. Michael turned to me, his expression unreadable. Emily, I'm sorry. I never should have put you in this position. I shook my head. It's not your fault. I wanted this too. But it can't happen again, he said, his voice heavy with regret. We have to end this before it destroys us. My chest tightened. He was right, but that didn't make it hurt any less. What now? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. We go back to being professional. No more late nights, no more this. He gestured between us, the space now filled with unspoken longing. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Okay. As I left his office, the weight of what we'd almost had and what we'd lost settled over me like a shroud. Jessica's betrayal had shattered the illusion, but it had also saved us from a bigger mistake. Still, as I walked through the empty halls, I couldn't help but wonder, was it really over, or had we just delayed the inevitable? Subscribe and leave a like if you want more stories like this. And tell me, what would you have done in my place?